have knowledge of the law of non-contradiction and knowing that it's true, because it can't be falsified.
I said we can't verify it as a fact. We can assume it as a fact, but how would you test that? And I'm happy to assume that it is a fact. So and I'm still looking for the relevance.
So then you think that we can assume that certain things are fact without having knowledge of them, and that's okay?
Don't we have knowledge of that?
Well, I thought you just said that we don't.
I said that when you define something as a fact because it's objectively verifiable, how do you objectively verify that something can be and both can't be what it is?
Right. So if the standard for
we don't
knowledge,
use the word fact, well, we can still use the word knowledge because we have examples of things being what they are. We have no possibility of it not being what it is. So then when we don't have that, then we can establish, okay, yeah, then that has to be true.
Right. Well, that would be considered a necessary being or a necessary fact.
No, it wouldn't.
And the answer is the law of non-contradiction applies to absolutes, or in objectivity if you define a fixed point of frame of reference. But I don't get how you can prove God, yet alone Allah, referring to logical absolutes. What's the connection? Is God a Platonic idea? Moreover, is God a Platonic idea in the most fundamental state, basic state? Moreover, is Allah a Platonic idea in the most fundamental, basic state? No, he's not. So, obviously, there is something wrong with your reasoning. I will try to help you clear all these things out.
Yes, it would, because you just said it couldn't possibly be another way, which means that it's necessary.
I said there's no possibility of it.
Right, which means that it's necessary.
Which means that there's literally no possibility. Doesn't mean that it's necessary.
Yeah, I think you're saying the same thing. I think
in order to say whether something is possible, in order to say whether something is, well, you can't, in science, you can't say that something is. Like religion always, asserts facts that aren't facts and pretends to know things nobody can know, right? That's just, every religion does that. But science can't do that because that is effectively lying. When you say something is a fact, it's not a fact. When you say you know things no one can even know, those are both lies. But in order to say whether something is true, you have to have the evidence indicating that. You have to be able to immediately show that there is evidence indicating that. In order to say whether something is possible, you have to show a precedent or a parallel or verified phenomenon indicating that such possibility exists. When you don't have that, that doesn't necessarily mean that it is not possible. It just means there is no possibility.
Okay, so Aron, you're saying that religion makes claims that you couldn't possibly verify, and you don't have evidence for. First of all, I want to say, you said you want to get to the meat of it, right? And this is the problem, that we are coming from different angles, and we have different epistemic commitments. And
yes, that's true. Aron Ra deals with effective reasoning. The outlook of effective reasoning is truth. You use Islamic reasoning. The outlook of Islamic reasoning is Islamic supremacy. Okay, the Aron Ra cares for truth. You care to prove Islam. Aron Ra takes reason in the right direction. You take reason in the opposite direction. You pre-assume Islam is true, and then use reason to prove your proposition no matter what. Aron Ra is doing philosophy, you are doing sophistry. If the outlook of philosophy is not truth, then it's sophistry.
What we want to do is come to a certain common ground in order for the conversation to move forward. We need to agree what it means for evidence to be, and what it means for verification to be, and fact to be, and all of these things. Because a lot of times these discussions just go on for hours of people talking past each other, using these terms differently, or not even understanding what they are whatsoever. I mean, there's a lot of philosophical literature out there about this, and it's not like any of this is non-controversial. But you said that religion asserts things without evidence. So you asserted a while ago that it is not a possibility that a necessary being exists. I'm wondering what your evidence is for that. There is no possibility that a necessary being exists. That's a positive statement. I was wondering what your evidence is for that. So what's the objectively verifiable fact that points you to this proposition that a necessary being cannot exist?
When Aron Ra refers to a necessary being, he is not referring to the term of the contingency argument. He is referring to God. What is probable? Difficulty of the task divided by the means we have to achieve this task. Or in a being, in a person, qualities divided by structure. God has eternal qualities. At the same time, he cannot be undermined by any structure. Therefore, eternity divided by one. And therefore, eternally improbable. Not a probability, in other words. Eternally improbable means impossible.
Once again, I repeat, in order to say whether something is possible, you have to show that there is a precedent or parallel or verified phenomenon indicating that such possibility exists. No one has ever presented one. You're welcome to prove me wrong by presenting that possibility. But if you don't present that possibility, then you're going to have to concede there is no possibility to present.
But the problem right now, Aron, is that you're making a positive ontological claim about reality by saying that in order to say that something is possible, we have to show that it is possible through objectively verifiable facts.
I said there's no possibility.
Yeah, but the problem is you yourself right now are making a claim about reality, and you're not holding yourself by the same standard.
I am definitely holding myself by the same standard. I'm saying that believers have not presented any such possibility. You are welcome to do so. But until someone does, my statement remains true. No one has ever produced a possibility that God exists.
So if no one ever, let's for the sake of argument for a second, because I disagree, obviously, but okay. If no one ever produced a possibility, if no one ever producing a possibility that God exists entails that it is not possible that God exists, if that's your view,
that would not assume that. In fact, I corrected earlier. I said exactly the opposite. I said that just because you don't have a possibility doesn't mean that it's impossible. It just means there's literally no possibility to discuss.
Oh, okay. So you're not a hard atheist in the sense that you say a necessary being does not exist. You're just saying
I'm a hard atheist.
So
notice here the loaded terms. Okay, they use this necessary being term first to imply to God, then to imply the term in the contingency argument, then again to God. They change the perspectives. Okay, when it fits them, the necessary being suddenly becomes God. Then it becomes the term in the contingency argument, referring to an necessary existence or essence. Okay, so let me clear this up once and for all. Atheists and theists agree the philosophical nothing never existed, simply because philosophers define that nothing in that way. Philosophers say, from nothing, nothing comes. We have something, therefore, that nothing never existed. So we always had something. So that is the necessary being. There always has been an initial essence that was inevitably there and could not have been any other way. That essence is not God, though. Now you need to prove that this essence is God. So you will spend 5 hours to say what I just said, with confusing terms and implying that the necessary being is God. No, it isn't.
You're more of an agnostic.
No, I'm a hard atheist in the sense that I know that God does not exist, in the same way, for the same reasons, and to the same degree that I know that leprechauns don't exist.
But yeah, what's your basis for that? So, for example, when we talk about leprechauns, so philosophers talk about there's the famous saying, evidence of absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and that of course needs to be qualified. So philosophers normally say that they speak about this, and they say that evidence of absence is absence of evidence is evidence of absence in a situation where the being that you're positing would actually leave, you would actually expect for it to leave evidence that you did not find when you're investigating it. So if you posit that a leprechaun exists, or if you say that like Bigfoot exists or whatever, we should expect a certain type of evidence that we can verify, through which we can verify the existence of such a being.
First of all, the mere fact that you believe in Islam, Abdul, gives away that you don't know how to assess evidence. Islam is the most obvious mythology ever. I mean, even if you try, you cannot make it more obvious mythology, even if you try. Okay, so the mere fact that you believe in Islam, although it's a miracle of negative evidence, a miracle, okay? I mean, you have to try to be that of a failure. Even the most outrageous person won't say marry children, for example. Even the more, okay, you just need to see Christian Prince to understand the comedy Islam is. Okay, so the mere fact that you believe in Islam gives away that you don't know how to assess evidence. So that's the one thing. The second thing is that what you said is exactly what is going on. Why God is hiding? What you would have expected if God doesn't exist? You wouldn't have seen here. He would have hiding because he has a reason. What else? Why more? Do you see justice anywhere in this world? Last time I checked, children die from cancer every day. What did you see? The world is exactly as evolution predicts. Lamely pragmatic, insanely wasteful, and randomly cruel, exactly as evolution predicts. The world, the universe is exactly the universe if God didn't exist. Exactly. So what else do you believe to see?
But
With
right now
Bigfoot,
you're saying, right now I don't believe that leprechauns exist because I expect a certain set of data or evidence. If it were to exist, I would expect that kind of evidence that would verify its existence. Now, in the case of the existence of God, what is that evidence that you haven't found that makes you come to the same conclusion that we do about leprechauns?
Okay, those are different topics. First of all, you would expect to find evidence of Bigfoot, and we would have found it by now if there was such a thing. And leprechauns, on the other hand, are entirely supernatural. Like God, they are entirely supernatural. They leave no trace of themselves, even when they supposedly do something. So people will attribute everything that happens to God, even when there's a natural explanation for it. They don't care. They know that there's a natural explanation, and they'll just pretend that God orchestrated that natural explanation. So natural explanations still become explanations of God. And then they'll pretend things.
Yeah, but that's sorry, Aron. That's precisely the point. So Bigfoot, there would be evidence. We don't have the evidence. Bigfoot doesn't exist. Leprechauns wouldn't leave evidence behind. Therefore, what a lot of people say is that in this case, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence because there is no predicted set of there's not a predicted set of data that you would expect as evidence were a leprechaun to exist.
Abdul, you know what you just did right now? You just accepted that you are not reasonable to believe in God. You just accepted that because reasonable to believe is not only level of claim and level of evidence, it's also level of conviction. So you just admitted that the level of conviction Allah demands, like Sharia, total submission of all aspects of life in a seemingly moral cult. Okay, so you just said that we don't have sufficient evidence for this level of conviction. You just disproven Islam, in other words, Abdul. Your line of reasoning, when you accept that there isn't that kind of evidence, but it might be, okay, this line of reasoning cannot meet the level of conviction Islam demands. So you just disproven Islam, Abdul. But continue.
So right now I'm saying, what is this evidence that you would expect to exist if God existed, and basically that we don't have access to, so that justifies you in concluding that God does not exist?
Abdul makes the argument that because God is supernatural, by definition, empirical evidence that Aron Ra demands won't apply to God, because God is beyond empiria, which means experience, in the natural world. This argument fails in the case of Islam because Allah manifests in the natural world and makes claims about the natural world in the Quran. Secondly, the level of conviction Allah demands presupposes strong, hard evidence. Thirdly, whether we can disprove Allah in an absolute sense is irrelevant. We are interested in effective reasoning. So even if Allah exists, he can still be unreasonable to believe.
Again, referring to leprechauns, you're looking for a way to disprove leprechauns, and the point that you're missing is that there's no reason to believe leprechauns.
That's two separate issues, though. There's two separate issues, Aaron. One is,
you need to have a reason to believe something.
Yeah, that's right. You need to have a reason to believe something. That's one thing. The second thing is having an understanding that something is impossible. Those are two separate issues.
Okay.
Now, what Abdul is explaining, he's saying that, look, if you just have an absence of evidence of X, it doesn't mean that X doesn't exist. So if I turn around and I say X does not exist, it means that I'm making a positive claim. Now, what Abdul said, he said that to make that positive claim that X does not exist, one of the ways would be to say, well, if X existed, I would see this evidence. If this evidence doesn't exist, therefore, that justifies me saying that X does not exist. So he's asking the same question because you're in a position where you've made a hard atheist claim that God does not exist.
What was my hard atheist claim?
The mere fact that you debate so much time about the nature of evidence and what we can really know is over. Okay, you just refuted Islam. Okay, if you had evidence to justify the level of claim Islam makes, you wouldn't debate 1 hour. What is evidence, and maybe what is the definition of truth? Can we really know anything? Maybe, it's your burden of proof. Okay, you again disproven Islam. If you really had evidence to meet the claim of Islam, everybody would have known, my friend. Because this kind of evidence you need to meet the claim of Islam, it's almost a miracle. So everybody would have known. They would say, 2015, Allah was proven, or yes. Okay. Because in contradiction to Christianity, your theology doesn't operate with faith. It operates with certainty. It baraka, deficits and credits. Okay, it doesn't operate in Christianity. They have faith. I choose to believe in Jesus. Christianity is not a political ideology. If you don't choose to accept the grace of Jesus, Jesus say, okay, do whatever you like. He doesn't put a gun in your head like Islam, make the world a dictatorship. Okay, so the mere fact that you discuss about the nature of evidence so much time demonstrates exactly that you don't have good reasons. And you need to challenge the first principles.
So the hard atheism, that God does not exist. That is your position. Not that I don't believe in God because of the lack of evidence. A soft atheist claim, but it's a hard atheist claim. So what Abdul is asking is a very specific question. He's saying, look, if you're making this claim that God does not exist, X does not exist, yeah, you have to either demonstrate that if God existed or X existed, we would see this evidence. Because we don't see this evidence, then I can discount God. Yeah. So you have to explain what Abdul's specific question was. You have to explain what that evidence is that we would expect, such that it doesn't exist, leading us to the conclusion that God doesn't exist.
Oh, I feel I'm repeating myself an awful lot. You're asking questions I've already answered, but we don't have a possibility. We start with that. And it's not just that we don't have a possibility, it's just that things are defined in reverse. I mean, you want to imagine that somehow the mind exists outside of the brain. There's no support for the mind-body dualism whatsoever. But you're assuming that consciousness pre-exists matter, and there's no logical conclusion that would lead you to any of the gods that men have ever devised. When you look at the entirety of the cosmos, there's just no way to conclude that this thing cares that much about the skin on the tip of our penis if it created 11 jillion galaxies and so forth. There's not a possibility for him to how does he control whether your team wins the game or whether you find your keys? How does he manipulate matter? And believers will commonly tell me that God helped them in matters like this. But in that case, God had to manipulate other people's minds, control other people's free will in order to, manipulate everything to these ends.
Aron Ra made a very good point that relates also to what I just said. Probable, okay, God has eternal qualities and he can do everything. How probable is that? Just from starters, just by default. Somebody that can do everything. How probable is that? If I told you I have a friend that can do everything. He can fly, he can say the best jokes, he can he can make, I don't know, he can create life, what is the probability I'm saying the truth? From the get-go, what's the probability? Very unlikely. So probability, are you seriously going to go to probabilities and prove that God is probable? How you will do that? Everything that would have made God improbable, God by definition possess. Let's not talk about God. Let's talk about X. Everything X would have needed to do to be improbable, God possesses these qualities by definition, because he can do everything. So he is improbable. There is no doubt about that. God always existed without explanation, in no environment. God is a conscious being, a characteristic of biological beings, but he is in no environment and he always existed without explanation. How probable is that? Hello, I just exist forever. I just exist forever. How probable is that? It just happens to exist forever. My friend, this is so improbable that if you had if you focus your mind to this, it's so insane idea that you might go insane. Okay, it's literally the most absurd thing ever imaginable. Eternally complex and qualified being always existed without explanation. That is the definition of improbability. That is even further than impossible. Okay, that is even further than not even impossible is enough to cover that. My friend, it's so absurd as an idea. Yet God is not improbable. Why? Muhammad said so. Why? Comets are demon missiles. The Quran is a miracle. Why? My friend, so absurd idea that if you think of it, you might go insane. Why is not improbable? Because the Quran is a miracle. If you read the Quran, my friend, it's the most immoral and ridiculous book ever written. And okay, I wait one and I wait the other, and I conclude that. Come on.
And they're just not thinking this through. So what I need is we need to show that there's a there, or we literally have nothing to talk about.
Yeah. So this, again, like I said, there's two issues. One issue is to say, make a positive claim that God does not exist. That's one issue, which means that we're saying it's logically impossible for God to exist. The second claim is, do we have justifications
Logically
and
and
reasons?
physically.
Yeah. So do we have justifications, reasons to believe something? Yeah. So there's two separate issues. And what we're saying is that you're talking about is this first point, which is you're basically saying that it's logically impossible for X to exist. Some of the arguments that you used was just simply to say that, well, if God exists, there needs to be consciousness, and for consciousness to exist, there needs to be a body to exist. Is that, am I understanding your particular
By definition
position
of
right?
what a mind is, yeah. I mean, a mind is the product of biology. So if there's no biology, how can you have a mind?
Okay. Is that a conclusion that you come through an inductive process, or is that a conclusion that is deductive?
That's by definition. That's what I understand the mind to be. So you have to redefine what a mind is if you want to have a disembodied consciousness. It requires a redefinition of mind, to my understanding.
Yeah. So nobody.
So can I ask
when we talk about the issue of the mind, nobody turns around and says mind by definition needs a brain or is a brain. Yeah. That is where you put the predicate within the subject. Nobody puts the predicate within the subject to say that it has to be this way.
Nobody meaning me, and a lot of other people who actually do that. Yeah,
because it's like, for example, look, it's as an example. Yeah. If I turn around and I say an unmarried bachelor. Yeah. Well, that's where you put the predicate within the subject. Yeah. So you're basically saying the same thing. Yeah. When you say
you're
mind,
saying that nobody,
you're saying when
nobody
you
does what I do and that other people do. Nobody does what we do.
No, I'm saying you're saying by definition. You're saying by definition. I'm saying it's not by definition that you can say that the mind is reduced to the brain. That wouldn't be the correct way to say that.
You could say, I said that you have to redefine mind. So now you're going to redefine mind for me.
No, I'm saying no, because it comes down to the issue of how we understand this term by definition. When we say by.
This video is a video that it shows the Pentagon making a vaccine that can make radicals atheists. A vaccine. So the mind is not related to the body. The Pentagon, as we speak, they made it already. They have a vaccine that if they vaccinate you, you will become an atheist. The mind is not related to the body. There are patients that they were hit in a certain part of their brain. What's that? And they lost character qualities related to this specific part of the brain. Sorry, a bug. Okay, so we have tons of evidence that the mind is related to the body. On the other hand, We have zero evidence that the mind is not related to the brain. Yet you choose to believe the other thing. Why? I thought you were the skeptic, that you go where the evidence shows. No.
When we say by definition, what we're saying is that literally in the definition of the word, we can come to this conclusion. And I'm saying that you don't have to, it's not even the definition of the word brain that you come to the conclusion of a mind. Yeah. That would be false.
In the reverse,
that would
it should be
a fallacious link between the two, because you'd have to have a further justification that a brain causes or produces the mind. So it's not by definition in that sense. That's why we have experiments. That's why we have neuroscientists, because they have to investigate this, as opposed to just simply saying we can just define it by the mind. For example, by definition, a triangle has 3 sides. I don't need to investigate. I don't need to empirically study this. I can come to that conclusion just by the definition of the word.
Our mind sees things in the environment like a triangle and relates that to a meaning. True definitions of things are whether our mind has the ability to describe something accurately and objectively in relation to the environment. Logical absolutes like the law of non-contradiction, that means alpha cannot be alpha and alpha at the same time, that refers to the definition of alpha we have in our mind. But as I said, our mind mirrors the environment. So in order for logical absolutes to apply, they need either an accurate inference to an absolute in the environment, either an accurate inference to an objective thing in the environment, but in this case also a fixed frame of reference. What is the difference of objective to absolute? Objective is something related to a fixed point of reference. Absolute is the reference by its own merit. I will make a video explaining how the logical absolutes apply, because there isn't any such video online. But all that are irrelevant to this conversation. God is not a Platonic concept, yet alone in the level of numbers, let's say. God is a complicated being that has cosmological sense. Okay, so it's not a Platonic thing, that it is not an idea. Okay, so all this stuff, they do all this mental gymnastics to blur the limits of what we can really know. That's the whole deal in this discussion. Thank you very much for watching.